I paint because I love to paint. Since I was a little kid, I knew I was going to become an artist. A lot of kids, when they're young, think they're going to be a fireman or an astronaut or something, and then they don't necessarily become that. But I've always been completely single-minded about this pursuit, and I'm still, now in my late 60s, single-minded about this pursuit. I'm more in love with painting now than I was early on. I'm more in love with painting all the time. Why? It's a simple answer. Because I'm more clear about what it is I want to say, more clear about my vision, and I have the craft to say it. So when you're younger and you're starting out, you have lots of ideas, you don't know which one you want to express, and you don't really have the skill set to do it. So there's kind of two different levels of frustration going on there, where you're not sure what you're saying and you're not very good at saying it. But as I'm getting older, I'm more excited about painting because I almost always pull it off. My subject matter, what do I paint, is based on where I live. I'm very influenced by this. It's a little town on the Gulf of Mexico, and it's in the middle of a 14,000-acre wilderness area. So it's very raw, it's very primitive, it's unfiltered. I paint nature on acid. If you say to someone, I paint landscapes, they could have an idea of something very bucolic and something very tame. And there's nothing bucolic or tame about my artwork. It's crazy, raw, primitive, colorful, full of textures, it's hot. One of the nicest things that any critic, nice in my estimation, that any critic ever said about me was, she said, "There's no safe place in Neumann's paintings." So I really liked that. 30 years ago, I'm not exactly sure what it was exactly that happened, but something happened, and I moved here from New York City. I changed from making figurative paintings to landscapes. I changed from being a straight-up oil painter to someone who paints with encaustic, which is hot wax. I quit smoking. So I really did. I started exercising every day. I traded some habits and became this person. With encaustic, you have to account for the fact that the medium itself is going to take you someplace that you were not expecting it to. So I have an idea what my landscape is going to look like when I start. It almost never looks like that when I finish, and that's because I'm open to the possibilities of where it will go as I'm engaged in it. So the wax is molten as I'm using it, and it melts at 165 degrees. But once you take it off the heat source, it doesn't stay molten very long. So this is an iron, and it's made specifically for wax. And when I do this, then something amazing happens. I put a bunch of layers under here, so now I'm going back to some of the first layers that I put down. And the reason to do many layers is because then these sorts of textures start to show up. And this is a really lovely thing. You take some oil stick, which is basically just oil paint in a stick form, and you scumble it on top of this wax. All right, so now I'm going to hit this with a different kind of heat. I used the iron. Now I'm going to hit it with the heat gun. In addition to having to do this, because you have to bond one wax layer with another wax layer, in addition to having to do it, it's really fun to do it because things happen. You see how the gray from underneath starts to pop up on top. I can start to make marks. I can put the wax back down. See how I can scrape some of that brown away to get back to the green. The torch makes a different kind of mixing. It's a lot less predictable. So I only use the torch if I'm looking for surprises. I think you can see from this small area, which is really just begun, it's a nice beginning, but it's nowhere near finished, takes us a fair amount of time. So multiply that by the rest of this area for a 45 by 60 painting, and you can see that it takes weeks just to do the preliminary steps, and then it takes another couple of weeks to make it look really good. My relationship to this environment, on some level you could say it's spiritual, for sure. But it's spiritual in the sense that I feel this great sense of rapture. I think everything is so beautiful. I think everything is so wondrous. To me, it doesn't matter whether there's some hierarchy, like I'm here, you know, God is here, the blue jay is here, I mean, just for humor's sake. I just think that everything I see and experience is so marvelous that I just try to reflect that back in my paintings. And because everything that I see is really so incredible, my desire when I moved here 30 years ago was to get involved with other people like myself who could preserve this area. So I belong to a group, and we're a 501c3 land trust, and we've put 14,000, 15,000 acres into preservation, or we've helped to do that. And so I can't really tell you whether my paintings themselves are aiding in this process with land conservation. I think it's more that you get down in the weeds with the county commissioners and with your state legislators and with your Army Corps of Engineers and with the Water Management District. I mean, I think that's where all the real work happens. But I like to think that maybe my paintings have some greater good aspect to them as well.